What's that? Morning, everyone. Call the Montgomery County Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, June 8th to order. Let the record show that we have 6 members currently with us in the boardroom. And, Charlie is on Zoom. Jill and Obed are excused for today. I've heard from Bob, so hopefully he'll be joining us by Zoom. With that, is there any board comments? And start with this in the room. Jonathan?
No comments, thank you.
Nicole?
No comments, thank you.
Dulcie?
Yes, I have 2 questions that maybe can be clarified by staff. When I went over the DCNR grants, there was one that expressed that they explained we're going to do a master plan for Greenland Park. Are we doing it in-house or is it going to be contracted out?
Do you know this?
I don't know who was selected. We were actually asked to review an RFP for the proposal through Parks, and we're on their steering committee, but I'm not sure who they actually selected.
So it was being done by a consultant.
That was my understanding. That was the intent.
So just find out.
Yep.
Just email me. And second, there was an article about the open space referendum that Limerick is now planning. And maybe, do you know anything? Have you been involved in this? There's a selection of properties. I just thought it would be good. Do we have a contract with Limerick?
Yeah.
No, we do not. Well, I think it still might be good for us to offer some help or see if there's some way that we might be able to help them, because the whole idea of having multiple sources of funding for open space, certainly if their priorities align with the comprehensive plan and our regional plan for greenways, would be helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ernst?
I have no comment. Thank you.
Charlie, any comment? Charlie? Any comment before we get the board meeting started? Thumbs up, thumbs down. If you get yourself unmuted, we'll pause the meeting. So my only comment is we had the Montgomery Award tour last week. So long ago.
Yeah. First, I guess.
Did a lot of miles and visited a lot of great projects, and I want to commend staff on putting that together. It was well organized. We kept on schedule and saw some great projects. So appreciate staff's all their efforts and everybody who attended.
Do we have the mileage yet? That was big. It was like,
It's not the mileage.
I thought it was
how
the
many municipalities.
Oh,
were there.
yeah.
municipalities. Yeah.
it's like counting the jelly beans.
Patty was trying to get a final count, but we think you were under on what, 24, you said?
That's a 24.
Yeah.
Was it more?
I think so.
Yeah.
We traversed, we went from one corner to the other,
Yeah.
and in between.
It's like count the jelly beans in the jar.
Anyhow, with that, is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes for our Wednesday, May 11th meeting? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Through the second, are any comments or corrections on the board meeting minutes?
They've been good. I haven't caught anything recently, so you're doing a good job.
Seeing no comments, are there any negative votes on the approval of the minutes? Seeing none, the approval of the minutes has been approved, or the minutes have been approved. Is there any public comment? Any public or staff comment in the room? Any public or staff comment on Zoom? If you'd like to make a comment about anything with the planning commission, please unmute yourself, give us your name and municipality you preside in. Any public comment? Seeing that there's no public comment, amend the record that Bob has joined us by Zoom. Hey, no, Bob. With that, we'll go to our first formal agenda item and the Bridgeport Borough Community Planning Assistance Contract with Paul and Eric. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, thank you. This is a renewal of a 3-year contract for Bridgeport Borough. Under the previous contract, we completed a comprehensive plan for them. Claire Warner completed that. It was adopted last year.
The contract ended in December and we normally, renew first of the year. At the end of last year, the borough's complete attention was on their residents in the aftermath of Ida, and it wasn't in the cards for us to work on the contract at that point. They indicated verbally that they were going to renew. It was just a matter of time. So here we are renewing for July 1st start date. June 30th, 2025 will be the end of the 3 years. It will mainly be focusing on comprehensive plan implementation. They have some zoning and subdivision ordinance recommendations that they would like to get drafted. They have some master park planning they'd like to do and some downtown parking study and streetscaping work. So that'll be under Matt Lubitz will be the new planner, and he'll be assigned to Bridgeport. We're going to be meeting with the borough and Claire and Matt to kind of go over the work plan and develop it out. And Claire will still be involved, but Matt will be doing the primary work for the borough.
Okay.
And they're aware of that as part of the renewal.
Great. Okay, so before we take any comments, we'll call on the motion. So before us, we have NCPC Resolution 22-6.1 Community Planning Assistance Contract Resolution for June 8th, 2022 for contract number 289, Bridgeport Borough. Length of the contract is July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2025. Total cost is $55,692, split evenly between the municipality and the county. Is there a motion to approve this?
Motion to approve.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and second. Are any comments or questions from board members on this community assistance contract? Bob or Charlie, any questions? Okay. Charlie said no.
Yeah.
Bob shook his head. Jonathan, Nicole, Dulcie.
What is there tremendous pressure in Bridgeport, any pressure with all the changes, with new building, and it just seems to me it seems fast, that there is a lot going on, but I don't know if the community is feeling that stress.
I don't know if it's stress, but they're definitely seeing a lot of interest in the borough in terms of development. Obviously, the riverfront was proposed for townhomes, and that's partly near where the area that got flooded. So, I think there's some issues and concerns I'll have to work through with that. But in terms of the infill development that we've been seeing has been pretty fast and furious over the last 5 or 6 years. And so I think they're ripe for some real development taking place and maybe some revitalization of their downtown. So yeah, I think that's partly what precipitated them wanting to update their comprehensive plan and looking at the future and making sure they're prepared.
Thank you, Eric.
Don, any comments?
Nothing. Thank you.
With that, or any negative votes on approval of the resolution? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is Montco 2040 implementation grant awards. And we'll call on.
So many, Ann.
Call on the
Awards,
ninja Ann.
less than last year, I
Less?
think. Yeah,
Is this you here?
yeah.
Morning, Ann, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
Good.
Okay. Maybe, I think there's one proceeding, but it's just a cover slide. So, okay, so for some of you, I guess this is old news, the ones that serve on the grant committee. But we will just take a quick overview of the grants that we awarded this year for 2022. We, as in previous years, recently had $2.5 million funding available to distribute this year. And it's a competitive process. We had 29 applications received and we made 18 awards. And these projects really do tie back to our comprehensive plan. Many of the projects are really tied to our focus categories of walkable communities and resiliency, and we've seen some really good work come out of this. Grant maximum is $200,000, but average awards are more like $100,000. And this is a serious financial undertaking for the county. In the last 6 or so years, we've awarded just over $10 million. And that's in addition to the 2.5 that we are awarding this year. So without further ado, a quick run through of the ones that we did award. Abington Township. Steve, this one is going to be named after you, I think. The Safe Routes for School, Safe Routes for Youth and Seniors for $110,236. This is really two projects kind of rolled into one. One is a sidewalk project along Edge Hill Road, and the other one is along Susquehanna Road. One is adjacent to an elementary school that needs a little bit of an additional sidewalk piece and a crosswalk to help students get from one side of the road to the other to walk to school from their neighborhood. The other is adjacent to a senior living community that will allow people to safely access nearby transit and shopping opportunities. Ambler Theater is being awarded $200,000 by way of Ambler Borough to fund structural repairs to the masonry at the theater. The theater is over 100 years old or close to it, and this would help replace some of the corroded steel brick supports with new materials and would also reinstall facade bricks. Douglas Township is receiving about $80,000 for tennis court renovation and conversion. This will resurface an existing tennis court, convert another tennis court into pickleball courts, and build an ADA accessible pathway between the existing path and the courts that are there at this park. Jenkintown Borough is receiving $48,000 for a school zone extension. This will extend the current school zone about 450 feet north on Walnut Street to provide a continuous school zone for school walkers. For those of you who don't hang out too much in Jenkintown, it's a pretty small place and all of their schools are clustered together and they have a lot of people who walk to school and home again every day. Lansdale Borough is receiving $68,000 toward the Stony Creek Pedestrian and Bike Improvements Project. This will help to install a new pedestrian and bicycle crossing on Hancock Street to include a flashing warning device and a bike fixing station at the Stony Creek Park entrance at the intersection of Hancock Street and Andale Green Drive.
Thank you very much.
No extensions. No extensions.
Not only no extension, you have to get your project done early. Lower Gwinnett Township is the recipient of $78,667 toward the Bethlehem Pike Pedestrian Improvement Project. This will target the southbound west side of the street, and this is gap funding. We've already received funding from the Montco 2040 program to do the work that should include both sides of the street. But like a lot of other communities that we hear back from, materials and labor costs are high and the monies that they received previously are not enough to get the entire project done. So we were able to provide a little bit of funding to help them move forward with the project as it was envisioned on this side of the street.
Wait, that's me. Try it again.
Okay. Perkiomen Township is receiving $200,000 toward a tributary restoration project along the Perkiomen Creek. This is an unnamed tributary which will be restored to its original location, resulting in less sedimentation, further stabilization of the stream bank, and a reduction in stream degradation. So that was a lot to say, but it is looking like it will be an interesting project. You know, Drew was interested in seeing how it progresses, and they're actually they're ready, I think, to move ahead already. So we will hopefully see this project soon. Pottstown Borough is receiving $200,000 for the Riverfront Park Stream Bank Stabilization and Bridge Restoration. This will repair the stream bank, improve the riparian buffer, and make repairs to the pedestrian bridge, which you can sort of see here is in need of some upgrades. Springfield Township, I think the third time's the charm with this application. This is for Cisco Park and an improvement project there. This will fund $130,000 toward improved erosion controls and earthwork, constructing an ADA accessible parking lot and walkway, and adding park amenities, benches, trash cans, things of that nature. not the playground. I know that the playground shows up here on the plan, but that is not a part of this project. Trap Borough has a really interesting project that I'm looking forward to seeing constructed and implemented. This is for $162,000 for a rain garden and stormwater playground. Sounds like a cool place to take your little ones to get muddy, honestly, but in a good way. This will be installed behind Borough Hall and kind of in and between the new ADA ramp that's being constructed and connecting to the building. Upper Dublin Township is receiving $200,000 toward the Greater Fort Washington District zip ramp. This will be a new off-ramp from the Pennsylvania Turnpike Fort Washington interchange with direct access into the Greater Fort Washington District at Commerce Drive. This is a small piece of the funding puzzle for them, but I also think that this project is just about ready to go. This is one of 7 locations included in the county's Pennsylvania Turnpike Corridor Reinvestment Study. So we were pleased to be able to put some funding towards a piece of this project. Upper Gwinnett Township is receiving $200,000 for the Haynes Run Stream Bank Restoration Project. This is the first phase of the project. They're constructing stream bank stabilization measures along Haynes Run. This will include the construction of 1 stormwater detention basin and regrading of drainage areas. Upper Marion Township is continuing with the First Avenue Linear Park project. This is the 3rd phase of the project and really the final step towards completing the trail through Moore Park. This phase involves installing the trail along the remaining gap on the south side of First Avenue, which is highlighted above. This project will construct 1,700, give or take, linear feet of trail. It includes solar powered pedestrian lighting, bus shelters, trash cans, benches, and plantings. Upper Moreland Township, another 3-peat application, but this time, the timing I think works out for this project. This is the Warminster Road Sidewalk Installation Project, also receiving $200,000. It's a small segment of sidewalk, 500 linear feet, but it will be installed along the south side of Warminster Road from Greenbelt Drive to Mill Road and will tie into pedestrian improvements completed as part of the Warminster Road Bridge Replacement Project being completed by PennDOT. Upper Salford Township is also receiving some gap funding in the sum of $100,000. This is their ongoing Park to Perkiomen Trail Connector Project. This is, again, due to things like supply chain issues and higher materials costs. The cost to complete this trail project has just gone up as time has passed. So this work includes ADA compatible trail construction, the purchase of construction materials, and ultimately the installation of a PennDOT approved road crossing. West Conshohocken Borough, I believe, is receiving its first grant from us for Mackenzie Park improvements for $100,000. Borough is proposing the renovation and upgrade of this park. The borough has adopted a master plan consisting of 4 phases of work at this park, and this first phase includes the installation of stormwater management facilities, an upgrade and expansion of the existing walking path in this park, and ADA accessibility improvements. West Pottsgrove Township, I think, is getting just under $40,000. This proposes the installation of 330 linear feet of grass berm to reduce field flooding, a rain garden to be constructed at an existing inlet, restoration of the playing field, new fencing around the field, and several other improvements to upgrade this park facility. And last but not least, Whitpain Township is receiving $183,308 to construct this pedestrian connection linking the core connector phase 3 trail to Wentz Run Park. That is pretty much it. You can see here that it kind of traverses around the minutes of the building, but is an important trail connection to get people through the area. That's what I got.
Great, thanks, Ann.
Nice.
So before we get any questions or comments, I just wanted to thank the committee members that were involved in reviewing county staff and that were involved in all of the meetings, including myself, Bob, Obed, and Nicole, who put in the time along with staff to review all these applications. Special shout out to Ann, who was given a lot of tasks of going back and forth between municipalities on questions and revisions and things that the committee were interested in before making final decisions. So all your work is appreciated. Thanks, Ann. So with that, are there any comments or questions from board members in the room? Hold on a second, Bob, I'll get to you.
Sure.
Anybody in the room? Good.
I want to say, I know I'm your color commenter on this, Stephen, but this is really a two-phased win-win. Number one, I think it's great that our board members get out, even if it's in their chairs, to look and see what's happening in all the different municipalities. And the better we understand our whole community, all 62 municipalities, the better off we are. And the other thing that I think is really important is that in its 7th year, this program has been so popular with our communities. And what we're doing is advancing with this carrot, the county comprehensive plan. And we get them to pay attention to what we're saying is good planning and good implementation. And in reality, it's giving them back the tax dollars that they give to us. And that's really a wonderful thing for county government, because a lot of times people at the local level don't realize what county government does or can do for them. So I think it's a great program, and thank you for chairing it, Stephen.
Other than municipalities submitting, is there any other criteria for an application?
School districts?
Well, criteria, you mean,
Like
evaluation?
there was a theater that you're gonna repair bricks, and then there were stormwater projects that you were
Alright.
doing.
Eligibility, yes.
Yeah, that's better, thank you.
Yeah, it basically has to be tied to a comprehensive plan goal, so it's very open as comprehensiveness implies. We do focus categories, and you want to run through that real quick?
We have focus categories that I didn't include in the presentation, but they are walk and bike Montco, they are adaptation and resiliency, and
Vibrant community.
Downtown
downtown,
destination.
yes, thank you.
And inclusion.
Walk and bike Montco as a focus category is by far the most popular focus category. We get a lot of communities looking to do trails and sidewalk pieces here and there. I think that those are fairly straightforward projects for most places. I think with MS4 requirements that municipalities have, we've been seeing more stream corridor restoration projects being proposed. But a municipality can apply on behalf of a nonprofit organization or some other entity. So a school district could apply for, say, a Safe Routes to School project, but the township or the borough would have to apply on the school district's behalf. We've done a couple of projects where we've provided funding to the Perkins Watershed Conservancy, but again, via municipality. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Ann. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, I'm happy to answer questions.
Stephen, if I could briefly, I would just like to echo Steve's, thank you to staff. As a member of the committee, it was very well organized. We had a lot of good discussions and there was a lot of follow-up. So much appreciated getting those answers. And I would also note, kind of echoing some of Dulcie's comments and expanding, it was exciting. We did continue to see new applications, new applicants. So it speaks to the popularity of the program and likely, peers speaking to one another about successes and, hey, if you're thinking about doing that project, you should consider submitting for this grant and kind of working together. So I expect some of that kind of discussions happening in our municipalities as well. So it's exciting to see new applicants.
And at this point, how many communities have?
Yeah, I like that map when we see.
After this round? A couple of this round.
There are only a handful of communities that
Yeah.
haven't received money. Some may have applied and not been chosen. I took the map out because we presented it previously earlier in the year. Really, honestly, just a handful. And we had, I think, 5 communities, or give or take, this year that never had received funds before and got them
Right.
this year, so we're slowly making progress there.
Bob, you had a comment?
Yes, Steve, thank you. And good job. I mean, you know, the maps and the explanation all during the process was very helpful in leading us towards our final decision. The question I have, if you could put up the Trap Borough project, please.
Sure. Yes, track.
Okay, now the Trap Borough project in the lower left-hand corner shows the ADA ramp that's going from the parking lot up to the building, the rear entrance to the building. I was up there probably a week or two ago on a particular project, and I noticed that it's almost it's 100% complete now. Did we fund that, or is this separate? Is our funding separate and distinct from this?
We did not fund the ramp.
Okay,
And there was already a playground, I believe, in the back of the building.
right.
But this was an upgrade, I guess a planned upgrade to the playground facility. So I'm not sure if any of the older equipment is being taken out. My understanding is some of it was kind of obsolete, but this sounded like a unique opportunity to fund. It almost seems like a little bit of everything all at once, a play facility for kids, a stormwater management facility for the borough's property. I know they're pursuing other state grants because we've been writing consistency letters for DCNR and DCED grants, and TRAP has come in a couple of times for consistency letters for this project in particular. So I'm hoping to see a well-planned and well-executed project in the end.
Well, my concern is when I was up there and I met with the borough manager who really has his game plan well thought out. But my concern is I noticed some things that didn't meet the criteria for an ADA ramp, you know, as far as like the railings and the projections from the railings. And my concern is we give, you know, whoever it may be, Upper Dublin, 200,000, 100,000. What guarantees do we have that a township or a borough is going to build it in accordance with the design drawings that they have submitted as part of the funding for the grants? In other words, let's just say hypothetically that someone was coming down the ADA ramp, weren't paying attention, went further than they're supposed to be, or couldn't grab a handrail because the handrail wasn't there. Someone got hurt, and then the lawyers jump in and, you know, have an expert do a ADA ramp certification and find out that it wasn't built according to the design drawings. How do we protect the county on something like that? Do we ask for an as-built survey and a certification when it's done, that it's been built in accordance with the design drawings and it meets the criteria? How do we handle that? And this is a general, not to put you on the spot, you know, but I mean, maybe it's something. I know, Steve, in other terms, other times, the county solicitor sat in on the meetings. Perchance is the county solicitor there now, or someone of his from his office, or is it something we really don't have to be concerned about? You know, in this litigious society.
But we do review the designs before it's built. That's a requirement. We have to approve them. So if we see anything that is different from what was proposed or just an improvement that should be made, we'll raise that flag.
But we don't necessarily look at what happens from that point forward. We do go out for a site visit when it's all done, but I see what you're saying, Bob. It's kind of too late when you've reached that.
Was there something I mean, they entered into a contract with the county for the grant.
Yeah, I doubt, we have to ask the solicitor. I don't think we're liable if they do something like
There
that.
must be something in the contract.
Well, especially
There's usually-
if we review the plans, that's our, you know, we're taking them on their word that they're gonna build to that. That's what their responsibility from that point, if they don't build it to plan.
Typically, when we get involved with grant funding, part of the grant process requires to hire an engineer to inspect the project. And at the end of the day, that engineer signs off that it was built, and they put their seal and their credentials on the line when they sign off.
Why don't we follow up on Bob's question and just get some information on the contract that the county enters into municipalities and make sure that that we are covered and that the liability does stand with the municipalities.
Okay.
Hey, everybody, this is John, your friendly solicitor.
A voice from the past.
Yeah, I am here. Yeah, I can look into it. I don't know that, you know, let me preface this by saying I'm not sure that this is how it works, and I need to research it to be sure, but I'm not sure that any liability is going to extend to the county, but I can certainly look into it. And if we need to rework some of our agreement language, we can do that.
Yeah, I mean, do that and get back to us, that'd be good.
All right.
John, this is, I guess, a timely question because I'm in the middle of drawing up the funding agreements for this round of applicants. So if there is language that I need to change, this would be the time to do it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll follow up with you after the meeting, Ann, and we can talk about
Okay.
It could be as simple as just the statement that the recipient of the grant certifies, and they'll probably turn to their engineer, hereby certifies that the design is in accordance with applicable federal, state, and local regulations and meets their criteria. Something like that, you know, something simple. And then the county, and since Steve's the chairman of the planning commission, it gets his liability out of there, because I was going to put his name on there.
I wasn't overly worried about it, but now I won't sleep tonight, Bob, thanks.
We also have our in-house pro bono sitting here. No comment?
No, I would think even in addition to liability, you'd want something at the back end of the project, either from the grant recipient or from their engineer, certifying that they built what they said they were going to build and we gave them money to build. I mean, I think the liability question, I agree with Bob, there's something out there and there's lots of lawyers who would sue anybody. But even if we weren't worried about liability, I'd like to see something on the back end that just says we built what we said we were going to build and got money for.
Right.
Ian, Scott, you guys can get back to the board after talking to John. And where we are with that. So, any other questions from board members? Any questions from the public or staff? Thanks, Ann. Thanks for all the hard work.
Dan too. I don't want to overlook him. Dan puts a lot of time into this.
Oh, Dan, right, yeah. Next up is a tip update. Call on Matt Square.
Good morning, board.
Good morning.
Morning. Yep. Good morning, Matt. Yes. Like I said before, we try to make it easy for everyone. So we haven't done this, I believe, since 2016. Going back into my notes, 2016 was the last time we gave a full-blown PowerPoint-driven tip update. And the reason why is because there really wasn't a whole lot to report. But this year, there is a lot to report. We think it's important to report. And so therefore, we are thankful that the board let us glom onto the agenda yet once again for the fourth month in a row. And give you guys an update on what's in the tip and how it went and where things are headed. What's it? Some people think that I could talk all day, but I really can't. But I'll do my best here. So just to give everyone a little idea of timeline, the tip gets updated every 2 years. I'll talk about that very, very briefly. It starts in the odd year in late summer. So it was last August, last September is when we began it. And it's usually about a 4 or 5 or 6 month process, depending on some things. So we are getting now to the end of the tip update process. DVRPC has listed a draft tip for public comment. You can find it on their tip website. And so that's what we're basically going to be basing it off of. It's that one right there. Sorry, my mouse is a little bit here. We chose a very attractive background for this presentation, much better than the last one. There we go. Great. Okay, so the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, 2023 to 2034. Matt and I are here today to give everyone an update on what's in it, what's important about it, where are things headed. And we feel it's important that this board be aware of what's going on in transportation world. So a couple of slides just to begin with, because we have some new board members since 2016. The last time we went over a couple of these same slides. We want to make sure that everyone knows what the TIP is and also what the TIP isn't. There we go. All right. So first and foremost, the TIP is not a magic document. The TIP is the region's capital budget for federal and state transportation funds. All of the money that we get from Congress that flows through Pennsylvania and comes down to our region, to DVRPC, it goes into this TIP. Same thing with all the gas tax and all the registration fees that we pay to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It all has to show up here in this TIP. So that's really what it is. It is a budget and a plan. It's part of how we plan things. So you can see here on the left, Montco 2040 and Connections 2050. That's our county comprehensive plan and our regional long-range plan. They all feed into the TIP. Those are the plans. The TIP is the budget. It contains 8 sections, one for each county, plus one called various, in which projects that get lumped together that cross county boundaries, they go into various. Interstates have been broken out for the last several TIP rounds into their own category, and then transit. Most people don't realize that. Nicole, as an engineer in the transportation field, do you know that SEPTA's capital budget shows up in the TIP?
I did not know that it does at that point, at this point.
Now you know that
It's
today.
not my
But
wheelhouse, but I'm
now-
happy to know that.
So now you've learned something new by coming to the board meeting today.
Excellent.
So transit is part of the TIP, and you'll see the numbers, how that plays into things and why that's important for our region. So covers 12 years, right? It's a 12-year capital plan and a 2-year capital budget. That's technically how we do it. The first 2 years, 23 and 24. As I said, this gets updated every 2 years. And so those other 10 years, basically, they can shift around, they can move. This thing is a budget. It's not a construction timeline. You can see here, there's the proof, updated every 2 years, right? It's a budgeting tool. It's not a construction timetable. So we run into this all the time, going back to probably when Leo started here in '85. Someone looks at the TIP and they say, oh, the project has construction money, in year 7 in 2020. This project's not happening until 2029. And we go, guys, we're going to update this again, literally in about 14 months time. We're going to start that process again. So don't worry about it. If a project gets through project delivery, when we update the TIP every round, things will start moving to where they need to be. Again, it's a capital plan for the whole 12 years, capital budget for only the first 2. So that's our little calculator.
So,
All right.
Matt, the first 2 years, monies are there for whatever the project is.
Yep. What happens is PennDOT looks at the first 2 years and they see, in this case, if this is Ridge Pike here, section B, and they see there's construction money in 23 and 24. So they can start an internal process to then what they call obligate that money. It's in the budget. So now they can fill out the paperwork to say, let's capture that from the ether and put it into a project and start to bill against it.
There's nothing more that they need to do in those first 2 years to get going.
Well, they may, but if so, they can pull from the first 4 years and do a little bit of accounting stuff and tap into this money, and they can kind of rob Peter to pay Paul to make it work. It's really a fascinating procedure and process, but that's some of the mechanisms they use in order to monitor and to work with this budget that we've created for them.
We stay on very good terms with our friends over at PennDOT District 6 that do all of this sort of behind the scenes machinations, just in case something happens with a project and more things get moved along quicker and we're able to tap into some of that money. There's an entire advanced construct process that happens behind the scenes and then slowly gets worked out as the time progresses and more funding comes available year after year.
So basically it becomes encumbered, the money, and then it's just like our budget.
Yes. So I think the state, PennDOT, and the Commonwealth use the term obligated. Federal Highway Administration uses encumbered. And it took us a couple of years to realize it's the same thing.
Okay, that's right.
So, yeah, so it's a living, breathing document. The DVRPC board processes and approves changes this tip every month. Scott is the first alternate for the county on that board, so he sees those changes. This thing's always in flux. It's not a snapshot in time. Because again, it's a budget and you don't want to look at it as anything other than a budget.
And, you know, there's so many factors at play with these projects. Right away is probably the biggest one that changes the timing. So you want it to be flexible and to be able to shift that money around a bit because you might have a project run into a right of way issue that takes 3 years
So you
to
have to be
solve.
Right.
You don't want that money just sitting there if there's another project ready to go.
You need to be opportunistic, so you have to have that flexibility.
Yeah, my question was, is there money there or
Right,
does
is it
something
real?
else need to be done?
Right.
But the money's there, they can just move it around as projects get delayed or advanced.
Yes, this tip document is basically the gospel. If it is here, everybody in PennDOT says that money exists, it is programmed, we
First 2
can
years.
access it, yes.
Yeah. But like I said, though, every month, PennDOT and DVRPC, they're processing changes. So if something happens on a project in the project delivery process and they need more money, you just got to pull it from some other year and move the shells around to create the money. And the bigger the amount of money you need to move, the more likely it's going to go before the DVRPC board. If it's really small, PennDOT does it administratively. The feds and DVRPC and PennDOT have a big written agreement. It's about 15 pages long. They say it's okay. So there's like a whole inside baseball that we deal with on the staff side and the public and folks like you guys on the board don't see. But that's our job, is to help make that process stay whole, basically. Make sense? All right. So the next question is, where have we been? We like to do this. Matt and I, we love our data. We love to kind of show what's been happening in Montgomery County over time. So, you know, one of the big stories that you're going to hear and you're going to see by the end of this is that Montgomery County saw the realization of a lot of its longtime initiatives, things that go back to the 90s, the early 2000s. We've seen those things finally happen. That's like a trophy for us, right? But it also has effects on going forward. And we'll get to that point in the presentation a little bit. But where have we been? Major projects built since 2015. And because I only had one line for that title, I couldn't put the real title on there, which is major projects built and started construction since 2015, because Chester Valley Trail is still under construction, if you guys know. But these are really the big things that we were working on in the 2000s, the 2015s to get out the door that were 50, 100, 150, $200 million. These are not small projects. Lafayette Street, you guys know, Chester Valley Trail, the 422 River Crossing Complex, the bridge over the Schuylkill River and Sullivan's Bridge, and some associated interchange stuff that's off the aerial. 202 DeKalb Pike, that's section 600. 202 Markley Street, that's 500. Part of that's built, part of it's underway now. 309 Connector Phase 2, that just began construction this year. These are big projects, and we've seen them done or we've seen them started, and it's the culmination of literally 25 years of planning work. So it's great for us. It's a feather in our cap. Now, what does that mean though? TIP investment, we like the numbers. TIP investment since 2010 in Montgomery County, we calculated in the TIP as $1.36 billion. And as a bonus, that number goes up to about 1.85 or so when you factor in the Turnpike's investment, which is not shown on the TIP. So remember those numbers. TIP investment, 1.36 billion. Yeah, it's like Dr. Evil with his $1 million, right? 1.36 billion in the TIP in the last 12 years, but it goes up to 1.85 when you include the Turnpike's own investment. So you're looking at almost $2 billion invested in Montgomery County's transportation system in the last dozen years. So where are we now? Otherwise known as what's in the new TIP. That's really the centerpiece of what we're talking about today. We're going to start by talking about the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. That was the law that Congress passed back in October, November of last year. And not unlike 6 years ago when Matt and I were talking about that TIP, we talked about the FAST Act, how it kind of saved the day. We were going to have to cut projects if Congress had not passed the FAST Act. Same thing here. We were staring down the barrel of losing a couple of important projects in each county to make our numbers fit. Because remember, the TIP is constrained. It's not a wish list. It's 12 years. You have a set amount of money. You have to make everything fit into it. If it doesn't fit, you have to drop stuff off. That's what we were looking at before the IIJA came in. The IIJA was sort of like a white knight for us. Not only did it prevent us from having to lose projects, but it actually gave us more money to add projects in, which again, I'm just going to give you a preview, we'll get to in a couple of slides. So these are important things. Really what it did in terms of giving us a lot more extra money was that bonus came in the form of bridges, bike ped, and transit. And so I threw some numbers up here. The region got about 35 new bridges added. So for Montgomery County, we got 8. 2 of those are county-owned bridges, things that we own, we're responsible to pay for. So we were able to get that. And then we're going to add some lump sums of about 50 and 20 million respectively in existing local bridge projects. These are programs that DVRPC set up a number of years ago to help funnel federal and state bridge money to our municipalities, to Montgomery County. I won't go into what these programs are too much, other than to say that money is earmarked, like I said, for the local stuff, so that it's not just PennDOT choosing their 35 bridges, taking all the money. The money flows down to the lower levels of government, townships, boroughs, and counties. For bike ped, it was a big increase, about 70% in transportation alternatives over the 12 years. And in absolute numbers, it's not a lot of money, I'll be honest with you, but we weren't getting a whole lot of money for bike ped to begin with from Congress, and they really upped their game percentage-wise compared to what they've been doing historically. And transit, SEPTA is getting about $100 million more per year in their capital budget, which they've already baked into the capital budget that they will be adopting probably this month. So those were the real winners, was bridges, bike ped, and transit. And that was where we got some of the biggest expansions of new projects into the TIP. What does it do for the region, the new TIP? We put some metrics up here on the screen. We're looking at just north of $20 billion for highways and transit over 12 years. So it was about a 25% increase. And that is a big reason why we didn't have to lose projects, but we were able to keep our existing road and bridge projects and add a few others.
You kept telling us to prepare for the fact that we were going to be losing momentum, not seeing as many projects, that we had received so many gifts, and now you're coming back and saying we're getting, it's good.
It was a big deal.
Yes,
It was.
it was. The White Knight rode in on the horse and saved us here. So,
The unicorn.
well, yeah, I guess it is a unicorn.
I have to ask, which Matt chose that image? Just so I know.
There are not a lot of good options on Google Images search. For
Every
White Knight.
5-year-old loves it.
Thanks for pointing out it's a unicorn. All right, so again, 25% more, $20 billion more for highways and transit over the whole 12 years of the TIP. We're looking at, when you break it down, it's actually more for transit than it is for highways. And that's something that we've been telling this board for a number of TIP rounds, is that, believe it or not, our region does invest more in transit than in highways. A lot of urbanists will usually say we're not investing enough in transit. And while that may be true in and of itself, when you look at the numbers, though, there is still a lot of investment in transit. And then lastly, like I said, there's a lot of money for bridges, bike ped, transit. Not that it's the majority of the investment, it's just that it's been more significantly increased by percentage than highways and bridges. Now, what does that mean, though, for Montgomery County, right? Like I gave you the numbers on the regional side, but what does it mean for us here in Montco? Well, 3 things that we think are important to mention. One is that we're looking at 61 total projects in the TIP in that Montgomery County section we were talking about, totaling just below $1 billion over the 12 years. So it's a pretty healthy number. In the first 4 years, we get about $375 million. And remember that first 4 years is what really counts, because that's the money PennDOT can obligate and spend. And then 85% of it, though, is for construction. So you can see 15% is for design, right of way, the pre-construction phases, but the majority of the money is to actually build things, which is good, because if those numbers went the other direction, it means we'd have a lot of projects in the pipeline, but we wouldn't know how to fund them yet. This shows that we have all the money we need to get things done, at least within that 12-year budget. Where does the money go within that $931 million? It goes to a lot of different things. It goes to ITS and signals, that's the largest, but as Matt will remind me if I don't say it myself, the large chunk of that is for the I-76 Integrated Corridor Management Project. That was Leslie Richards' idea of adding additional lanes on there that could be controlled with the sign based on traffic needs, what we call dynamic, managed lanes, they call it these days, managed lanes. and some other ITS elements that would help you to use what's there on the Schuylkill without having to double deck it or add more lanes. But that's going to take up most of the 251 million. Bridges get a lot of it, capacity gets a lot of it, intersections get a lot of it, and road rehabilitation or maintenance gets a lot. Bike ped gets about 16 million, but that's more a factor of the fact that the transportation alternatives money is just so much smaller than all the other types of money Congress allocates. So it's pretty well spread out. We're looking at 4 projects above $50 million. Like I said, I-76 integrated corridor management, 309 connector phase 3, which is partly in Bucks, partly in Montgomery County, but we'll claim full credit for it today. US 422 M1B, that's the last piece of 422 in Lower Pottsgrove. And when we combine all the pieces of Ridge Pike that are in the tip, you get more than 50 million. It's a pretty big project taken as a whole. So new projects. This is the second round in the last 6 years in which we were able to get a couple of new projects in. They weren't big projects, but they're important projects. So these are the 3, not including the 8 bridges I mentioned before. 309 connector phase 4, which this is 63. This is old 40 foot. And this is the new problematic left turn slip ramp to go southbound on the turnpike at the Lansdale interchange. This backs up terribly. And all of the good folks in the Indian Valley are worried that when the 309 connector phase 3 opens up and makes the half interchange with 309, that this area, which already can't handle the traffic because of this left turn, will get even worse. So PennDOT and the county and DVRPC worked to program a project that would lengthen some things behind the photographer that you don't see on the picture to make it handle all that traffic and get people on the turnpike efficiently without blocking it all. 29 and 113 has been described by a colleague at PennDOT as the worst intersection in Montgomery County. And so we have that now on the tip as a real project. And Perkins and Township has been kind of wringing their hands over a number of years about how to fund and move that along. And so we feel like we have a solution. And then the last one, DeKalb Street 2-way. This is something that came out of a study Norristown did in 2010 to see whether or not it would work if you change DeKalb from one-way north, the entirety of Norristown, to 2-way. Would it work? Would you be able to get people to downtown Norristown instead of sending them down Markley and over the bridge and right to King of Prussia and away from our county seat? And the study that McMahon did at the time said yes, but you needed 202-600 to be done before you could do this. So we now have this in the tip. It's probably going to take a while to get done, but we believe very strongly it will help to revitalize Norristown even more and contribute to what we're doing on Lafayette Street. So 3 new projects in the tip. Transit investment, we just got to mention real quick as we're getting towards the end. SEPTA, their capital budget now is $1.1 billion a year. It's bigger than it's ever been. Part of that is because of the TIP and the IIJA. Within Montgomery County, they're making big investments in the high-speed line, partly because they want to make sure things are ready for KOP rail, which is another big investment they're making. Part of the project of significance, bus revolution, regional rail, buying cars, modifying for the trolley system, KOP rail. Those are all things that fall into the tip that are major components of their capital budget. And this one, I'll make a brief mention. The argument that I alluded to before about our region not giving enough money to transit, CMAQ is congestion mitigation and air quality funds. And it's meant to do just what it says, improve air quality, mitigate congestion. And so historically, we've spent that on bike pads, sidewalks, trails, and a region will still do that. But we always had more money than we knew what to do with. And so we've redirected some of that to SEPTA because we all believe around the region that using our transit system is a good way to improve air quality and mitigate congestion. So that was sort of a way in which we're able to say the region is using its highway dollars to invest in our transit system without rating the things that pay typically for roads and bridges. PART also gets some money as well. Just remember, Montgomery County has 2 transit authorities, not just one. And so out in Pottstown, they get about $2.5 million each year. That's about a $500,000 increase from what they were getting before. Most of it's for operating, but they do take a chunk for capital. They're in a little bit of a different boat than SEPTA, but they still see benefits from the new tip. So lastly, where are we going? So here's the thing. Our system is mature, right? So we're getting to a point now where we're going to start to see things that aren't what we are used to from the 80s, the 90s, 2000s. We're not going to see new highways built. There just isn't really the room to do it. And, you know, it's not a new technology. People these days don't tend to get behind large new roadways. And you're probably not going to see a lot of road widening either. Things are moving more towards operations. So you're going to see more roundabouts get plugged in, intersection improvements, bridges, and projects that we call multifaceted. That means, you might be improving an intersection, but you might be adding bike ped to it. You might be doing some safety things as well. You might be adding some turn lanes, so there's a little bit of capacity in there. Usually projects have a whole host of benefits. They're not just to do one thing and one thing only, like safety or mobility. So you're going to see these types of things that get more into operations, more into safety, more in maintenance. That's just the way planning is going. And that's what happens when your system matures and you're not in growth and expansion mode as much. So where are the feds headed? And that's really why these last slides are important, right? We can say as county planning staff that we believe, the county's vision should be X, Y, Z, but sooner or later, you're going to run into what Congress appropriates their money for. So if we said here, we should stop investing in our roads entirely, invest only in transit, well, that's great. But Congress says, here is your money and you need to use it for the national highway system. You need to use it for, safety reasons. And so you're going to have to use the money sooner or later for what Congress tells you to use it for. So they're getting focused more and more on safety and maintenance and walk and bike. And I think you saw that in other slides here. And then also performance-based programming. They want our region and every region of America really to move more towards a data-driven system. We'll call it Moneyball for roads and bridges and transit, right? I almost put a picture of Brad Pitt up there, but I didn't. So that's what they want to do. They want to say, all right, how do we get the most bang for our buck? Because the feeling is that we're not going to be expanding. The IJ was a lot of money, but even President Biden wanted more than what Congress gave him. So we're not going to be able to do everything we want. So how do we use data to figure out our best investments? And they're going to make our region really scrutinize what are we getting for our money? What have we gotten for our money? And if we don't meet some of their metrics, we have to redirect money in certain ways. That can be scary, but it's the way things are going. So with that, I will end and I'll open it up to any questions that you guys might have in person or online.
Thanks, Matt. So with that, is there any questions, Bob or Charlie?
Yes, Matt. Hello.
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay. On the Route 29 and 113 project, what is the resolution that they've come up with? You've got those two buildings which are close to the road, which kind of limits you. Is it going to be with some type of signalization with a advance left or right or something? How do you plan on? I travel that road a lot, so I just wanted to know what the proposed modifications are.
Yeah, so Bob, I'll try to answer that the best I can. Back in 2016, Perkiomen Township paid to update a 2003 study that looked at that intersection. And it came up with a couple of different options. All the options looked at some level of additional turn lanes. Just some options had right turn lanes in certain places, but they all had left turn lanes. And so it depends on which option PennDOT wants to choose as they go through design. So when they do PE, they're going to have to do an alternatives analysis. They're going to have to do an environmental impact statement and follow the NEPA process. And we're not exactly sure how that's going to come out. Most likely the buildings in the lower right and upper left. So that would be the tavern. And then there's an apartment building that's diagonal from that. Those are the two that are most likely to be affected, but it could be the gas station instead. We don't really know yet, and we probably won't know until we're in design.
From the tip mechanics side of things, this particular project has preliminary engineering money programmed in year one. So PennDOT can, as soon as the new fiscal year clicks over and on October 1st, start analyzing exactly what the solutions is going to be. Everything else for final design and right-of-way and utility and constructions are further out into the tip process just because nobody is quite sure what the eventual alignment and layout is going to look like. But we made sure that at least the starting to answer those questions for that funding can be done as soon as the new tip takes effect.
And Bob, I'll take that one step as well and say that PennDOT actually has already received 16 RFP responses for a design contract for that, which means that PennDOT's getting a jump on that project. And their goal is to have an engineer under contract by the time the tip takes effect October 1st.
And that's what I was hoping. So you guys talking about the timing, that's great. The money's there, but it does take PennDOT a lot of time to get through their procurement process. So that's great. I mean, that really tees it up for that to actually happen in year one.
Do they anticipate property acquisition?
for that project.
Yeah.
It's probably a good bet that there will be property acquisition. The question though is really.
Depends on the alignment.
Yeah.
Charlie, did you have a question? You're still on mute, Charlie.
Matt,
There you are. There you go. Now we can hear you.
okay, am I on now?
You are. How you doing, Charlie?
Thank you. Matt, are we progressive in our thoughts in the next 20 or 25 years of automatic driving and things like that in these new plans?
Yeah, that's a good question, Charlie. I think what we've been trying to do with our tip is we've been trying to program projects that are more like the ones that I had up here on the screen. I'll put them back up. The three that I mentioned. You know, projects that are smaller in scale compared to maybe like Chester County, they have major improvements to US 30. That's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars. You know, the projects that we're looking at are more on the community level scale. And so I think they're more impervious to changes in vehicles, you know, whether autonomous or not, whether they use electricity or gas. I think we've kind of hedged our bets a little bit. But, you know, there are still some changes that will probably happen with autonomous vehicles that we just don't foresee yet. And so it's a little bit hard to think 25 years in the future, just because we don't know what the spinoff effects are. My personal belief as a professional planner is that out here in the suburbs, going to autonomous vehicles probably won't change our lifestyles and how we drive and get around all that much. You know, if you have to drive your own Ford Mustang or you have it drive you yourself, either way, you still need to get in the Mustang and go where you're going to go, because that's the built environment we've created for ourselves. It may not change as much as say in the city where it's a little bit more dynamic, there's more transportation options. But we think though that focusing more on our communities will be a little bit of a hedge against some unforeseen future technologies.
Thank you. One other question, if I could. DeKalb Street has been under construction for gosh, many years. I don't know. Can you give us a list someday as to when you think some of these projects will be completed that have already been started? Like the various sections of DeKalb Street and the various sections of Ridge Pike?
Yeah, Charlie, absolutely. We'll put together an email for the board if that's okay, if you guys would like. And we'll just list some of those major projects that are under construction now and what their completion dates are.
I think that would be good. Thank you.
Yeah, PennDOT had a number of procurement issues, pandemic issues, a lot of projects that have been under construction for a while have had delays stack up and stack up. I know there's one that I personally keep getting ragged about, the Hanging Rock roadway in Upper Marion for 320. I think that was supposed to be finished last week and it's still dragging out. Yes, there's the ones that are under construction that it feels like have been under construction for a very long time. And then there's the ones that we're hoping to get out soon and are trying to schedule in effects of inflation and procurement deliveries and things like that. But yeah, we can try to pull together at least what is publicly available in terms of dates for expected completion. Everything is always subject to change, especially with large projects like this.
Yeah, the acquisition of materials has been a huge delay and will continue. I mean, it hasn't turned the corner yet, so it's delaying a lot of projects and it's just out of, you know, the agency's control.
Yeah.
Since you say it's analytics, are we changing how we're collecting data?
Regionally, yeah, regionally we are evolving a little bit. I don't know, Matt, do you want to speak to these? Because you've been more involved in some of this. DVRPC has all sorts of these little subcommittees that's collecting data on all these different things. Kind of herding the cats can be a little bit tough. But yeah. The
question, if that's driving everything, I'm just curious if the technology on how we collect data is any different. If we don't know, we don't know.
We're scratching the surface on true big data results. There are certainly plenty of data sets that are getting created and getting formed up and are out there. For the most part, they are expensive for now. I think we're hoping for the pace of technological innovation that generally brings costs down on everything. And if we can get some costs lower to the point where the region might be willing to spend money on it, I think then we could have some larger scale things. What Matt was largely talking about in terms of performance-based planning and the data that's being driven for that is really been project-based. PennDOT especially and DVRPC are trying to move towards asset-based life cycle planning and saying, you know, we have this particular bridge. If we run it through this model, we expect that 15 years from now, it's going to need a rehabilitation. And if we do that, we will save money as opposed to waiting till year 25 when it needs an entire replacement. So some of those things are starting to show up in TIP and long-range planning funding exercises.
Some of that is just asking questions. What are the questions that we want to ask in the data? Do you know what I mean? That's been changing.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of, there's air quality data, there's mobility data. There's the life cycle data and management, and we interact with different slices of that in different times, and DVRPC is trying to pull it all together a little bit. It's hard to do, but Matt makes a good point though, and when you shift to that sort of asset management database, we've already gotten a peek from DVRPC what the outputs are on that, and sometimes it leaves you scratching your head because you know it's moving away from the all right. Let's look at the PennDOT looks at the list and says all right, which bridges are in the worst shape. We'll start from the top and work our way down, right? And when you do this sort of asset management thing, sometimes it says, this bridge just isn't important, let it fall in the right. And then you look there and you say, well, politically, if we let this fall in, we'd be hearing from, it's like our Collar Road Bridge, you know, 8,000 people use it a day, but we heard complaints from about 15,000 people who say they use it, right? You know, you can't let it fall into the river because you think that, you know, you should just be investing on something that's better. You got to do it. So it's really tough. And that's going to be the challenge for us in our field over the next 10 years is how to make something out of that.
Algorithms are only as useful as the programming that goes into them in the first place.
But you also are able to make different decisions. We are kind of churning through all those emergency. We have to work on these bridges. We have to get these up to standards. We're starting to really actually chew through some of that stuff. So it does open up funds to be able to do other types of projects. So that's a good thing. We aren't there yet, but we're definitely moving in that direction and we'll be able to make different choices as we move forward, as we get those things off the list.
On the one hand, yes, the state has definitely been improving their larger scale backlog of structurally deficient bridges. On the other hand, Isaias, Ida, whatever the next I hurricane name is going to be, that's going to give record flooding to us this year, who knows? That's where we are facing larger external events that just keep bringing a lot of those transportation project needs back up to where they have been previously.
Anything else, Charlie? You good?
No, thank you.
Anybody, any comments or questions in the room, John?
Yeah, I just have a general budgeting question, kind of touched on it here. As those projects move from the 12-year capital plan to the 2-year budgeting piece, and those budgets are evaluated for what they originally were versus the supply chain and inflation, do some of the projects on the TIP eventually move off because they just can't be the money just isn't there to afford them because the projects on the front end have become so expensive that we can't do that?
That's exactly what was happening up until the IIJA. And that's what Delsey was alluding to is we kept trying to tell you guys, we're going to this TIP cycle. It looks like we're gonna have to lose projects. And that's a reason why. And that was before we hit 7-8% inflation. It's just projects cost a lot. You know, we always underestimate that. And even within the TIP though, PennDOT and DVRPC use assumptions about, you know, inflation over time. And they're very conservative, meaning they're probably higher than real life, at least up until now. You do that because when you do hit 7 or 8% inflation, then at least you've hedged yourself a little bit. But traditionally they'd go with like, you know, 3, 4, 5% a year. And that gave you really high numbers. And that was a real issue between the counties. When Chester County, for instance, was looking at having to lose some of Route 30, they were like, well, you know, you guys have made these conservative assumptions. If we made different assumptions, we could afford all this instead of having the political issue of cutting things. So it's a little bit of a back and forth cat and mouse game at times, but you know, they do try to bake in some recognition that things go up over time. And sometimes it does result in projects being lost the longer you are from a major funding bill like the IIJA or Act 89.
Two major overarching conditions, I guess, that we had been facing going into this before the IIJA was passed was projects are going up in cost, and PennDOT specifically has been trying to focus more of the funding that they get from the gas taxes specifically to interstates. I think At one point, we were spending closer to $500 million a year on interstate projects around the state, and their goal is to move that up to $1 billion a year. Where does that money come from? It comes from all of the regions and the choices that they have available for federal funding basically all gets shunted off or scraped off the top by PennDOT before the regions have a chance to divvy up the funding. So that was why we had been trying to say to everyone, be careful, there might be some issues with projects coming along. The IIJA basically saved us from having to cut projects and allowed us to get a couple new ones in. However, we did not get all of the projects in that we had wanted. There was a further list of things that would be nice to have out there. And the other problem for our region is it is specifically interstates that PennDOT is focusing on around the rest of the state. US routes do not count as interstates, and therefore the large scale project that Chester County wants to have on US Route 30 isn't eligible for the interstate funding that PennDOT would be programming. Therefore, the region is going to have to figure out a way to fund that. However, what the interstate program is funding is I-95 in Philadelphia. At least a lot of the responsibility for that multi-billion-dollar project is not on the region's decisions for how they are spending the money that is allocated to them.
Yeah. So to put it in visual sense here, John, what PennDOT was doing up until the IIJA, although they're still doing it, it's just not a problem now like it was before, is they would take money out of all of these categories plus various, and they send it off to Harrisburg, and Harrisburg would then go and send it back to the regions, and it would show up here. And I think we're getting more than we give. Like, the other regions in the state are probably losing money. They're taking off the top and it's going to interstates down here perhaps.
I-95 is a really big project.
But what it does for us though, even if we're donee states, or that's the term we used to use for the federal thing, like Pennsylvania gets $1.15 back for every buck it sends. It's the same kind of thing here on the state level. Whatever they take, we get a certain amount back for 95 or 76. But even if we come out ahead, really what it does is it takes money away from the counties and throws it in interstates. So that's why our projects, the things that we value in Montgomery County that are in our communities, we're starting to suffer. And then the IIJA came in that would provide enough money to cover all that and add some new projects.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Cole, Jonathan? Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. Yes. Yeah. Next up is housing and non-residential construction report. Paul and Dan.
You're right.
Was yours?
Yeah. I'll be first and then last.
Morning, everyone.
Oh, you know what? Do non-res first. I'm sorry, I accidentally gave you the access database for Hub 2021, not the icons look so similar.
Yeah, if you look at the type.
I'm so sorry.
It's not a PowerPoint.
We'll do non-res first.
One quick second, almost there.
Is that PowerPoint in the housing units built folder?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's
I'll
done.
do it right there while you're-
Oh, great, thank you. All right, do you want me to wait for Dulcie or should I start? Okay. All right.
Great project.
Oh, the residence inn? Yeah, it's really neat. See, I've been there before too. All right. Hello, everybody. Anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Dan Farina. I'm a senior county planner here at the Montgomery County Planning Commission. And today I'm going to talk to you about our yearly construction reports. We do one for housing units built and we do one for non-residential land uses. Today, we're going to start with non-residential land uses and it's for the year 2021. We get all this data from the BOA, and then from there, we categorize it in different land uses, clean it, and come up with our total for the year. So for non-residential construction in 2021, there were 2.259 million square feet constructed. That's a relatively high amount. It's the largest amount constructed since 2016. The office sector accounted for 38% of all non-residential construction this past year, which was atypical. Since basically 2003, we haven't built, that much or similar amounts to that. The commercial and combined institutional sectors were also strong with around 500,000 square foot constructed in each in 2021. Also, and this is the highest I think I've seen it since I've been here, 76% of all new non-residential construction completed in 2021 was infill. So already additions to existing sites or redevelopments. And we're going to talk a little bit later about the county comprehensive plan, how this development fits within our goals for the county comp plan, specifically within growth and preservation. So first up, again, just showing you the totals. You can see that in 2016, we had the most in recent history, so that was 2.4, but 2.25 ain't bad, and I think, given with how built out the county is in general at this point, seeing this amount, nearly yearly is actually fairly good, but it's nothing like it was, in the 1990s and early 2000s. I mean, they were 5 million square feet a year, things like that, when we were really building out a lot of the office properties that the county has now. Now that that's kind of, ebbed, mainly what we see is additions to commercial and institutional operators. So again, just pie graph showing you the distribution. These two down here, you can see institutional aging, so facilities that are aged care facilities. So they were the lion's share of the institutional figure. Recreation municipal had some of the smaller figures, but they still did, post something. And then commercial was about a quarter of all of it. But office, again, is the big one this year, and that's just unique. We just don't usually have that. And I think mainly the reason for that is because we had a few large projects just all finish at once. You know what I mean? It's just kind of the way it worked. So again, office, 863,000, that's not bad. It's just on, shy of a million really. And you can see though, you can stack up the last couple of years and it wouldn't even, equal it. So clearly office, was really took off this year. And I don't think we have any super large ones on the horizon, so that you may likely see this come down next year. But this is still a good showing. And this represents Sora West, 7 Tower Bridge in Conshohocken, as well as the SEI edition. I just stepped on my own foot. So it's all right here. So Sora West was the largest one. It's also AmerisourceBergen's current headquarters. That was 447,000 square feet. So it's a pretty large building. 7 Tower Bridge is 257. The SEI edition is just over 100. And then the next biggest office, as you can see, just generally, this is what we do build, things around this size, is the CHOP medical office facility in Abington. The top 3 for office construction were Conchie, Upper Providence, and Abington. When looking at commercial construction, you can see we have around, around the average essentially, that we see over the last decade. We posted this year, so I'd say it's a pretty standard year for commercial construction. We've had higher years when things like the King of Prussia mall connector completed and things like that. This year, unfortunately, 2 of the largest ones are CubeSmarts, storage. I mean, they're valid land uses and people do need that service, but they are, an interesting land use, and they are oftentimes like some of our largest commercial now. The other one would be the Residence Inn by Marriott in Lower Merion, which is pictured up here. It's a really interesting, redevelopment of an existing site and incorporating some of the old industrial infrastructure that was around there as well. And then lastly was the Element in Valley Forge in Upper Merion, Marion. Upper Merion, Lower Merion, then Plymouth were the top 3 for construction. Institutional, this year was combined 457, same thing, around the average that we typically see over the last 10 years. Montgomery, Lower Providence, Limerick, and Upper Merion were the top 4 for institutional construction. Hudson Estates, which is a age-restricted personal care community, that was 119,000 square feet. Eagleville Hospital expansion in Lower Providence, that's interesting. That was 116,000 square feet. It's like 3 or 4 new buildings, treatment buildings. Arcadia at Limerick Point, that's another age-restricted development. And Anthology of KOP, Upper Merion, which is also another age-restricted development. This was difficult because I had to separate all the square footage of all the independent units out from that. But what's interesting is their website actually has a really good tool that you can see all that. So that was great. That was really easy.
We are aging, are we not?
Yes, we are. We are aging. We are. Age dependency ratio in the county has increased consistently over the last 5 years, and it's chiefly due to our elder population. Yeah.
Dan, why wouldn't the Abington CHOP
be institutional because it's private medical offices. It's not a like medical facility where they do outpatient or inpatient like procedures. All they do is imaging and just basic medical diagnosis and primary care physician. Whenever they're primary physician, like doctors' offices, we classify them as not institutional. If it were the CHOP KOP facility, which is a hospital, then it goes in the institutional, and that'll be on next year's report. It just finished after the 2021. This is just a map showing you the distribution of these properties across the entire county. Last year, there was a really big cluster, like, up here in North Penn area. It's really shifted this year. Most of the completions this year are along 422 and in, what I call the knot of highways around Norristown and Conshohocken. You can see too, a lot of the biggest ones, actually 5 of the largest ones are just in that area alone. So I was just, again, it kind of shifts each year. It seems like every other year, this is a hot spot for development just because this is where a lot of the more intensive land use is zoned for in the county. And then this is just showing you just how we made out this year with the related to our growth and preservation map, which we produced for the 2015 plan. So we're just monitoring essentially our progress from that point. You can see that over 1.7 million square feet of the developed non-residential square footage was in already developed areas. That's really great. Literally less than only 416 square feet were in somewhere that we didn't want to see development, right? Either in an already developed area or in an area that we designated for growth.
0.02%, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I had to show because it would look weird saying 0.0.
Yeah. You can round that down to 0.
That is a bathroom in a park.
Is it really?
Yep.
460 square feet, yeah.
I just looked at a house in California that was $800,000 that was that quick, where you are.
But so this is really great news, and I think that we're going to continue to see more of this. I think a lot of our larger scale commercial usually does typically, take the place of redevelopment. Another great thing this year, actually, too, we hit a kind of low, right, as a result of the pandemic last year because of jobs. This year, we're back up to our previous, the high that was the high in the, right before the Great Recession, right, was that 489. So we're kind of back to where we were, right, in 2008. We had reached a high of 505, by 2019, but of course the pandemic really dropped us. But I think this rebound, is good, and I think it'll just keep going up from here. We'll probably hit that 505 within the next couple of years.
A relatively quick rebound.
Yeah,
Kind of look at it.
Yeah, a really relatively quick rebound. Yeah. And then this is not so great. Retail and office vacancies have started to increase over their typical average that we've seen in the last 5 years or so. Office has really increased to about 13%, which is pretty high. Typically, again, we do like to see it around here, around 10%. I think it's pretty standard for the industry. However, what I will say is that you see the incline to the fourth quarter of last year seems to be plateauing, hopefully, and that we'll see that come down over the next year. Retail shot up in the fourth quarter, but that's not atypical. The last couple of years, that's kind of been somewhat what it's been doing in the third or fourth or first quarter of the following year. You'll see kind of that shoot up. But again, it's still a little bit higher than we like to see. Still a relatively low retail vacancy rate, though. We've always had a really low retail vacancy rate to begin with. So this 5% isn't really anything to fret over so much, because we've always kind of been in a way underbuilt a little bit with that, based on retail vacancy rate. Not that I would say that we're underbuilt in terms of commercial square footage. And then of course, industrial did not see really any change. And I think that just goes with the trends that we're seeing, which just distribution is just eating up so much, continues to eat up, warehouse space and distribution space. So in summary, non-residential square footage growth in 2021 was higher than 2020 and above average compared to previous years. The office sector was the most active with over 860,000 square feet constructed. Significant developments include Sora West and Conshohocken and the SEI addition in Upper Providence. Prominent infill and revitalization projects were the Residence Inn in Lower Merion, an Amazon distribution center in Plymouth, which I think was also the most expensive land transaction in the county's history, and the CHOP medical offices in Abington. Overall, goals from the county comprehensive plan were met in 2021 for non-residential. And looking ahead, 2022 is likely to continue the steady pace of construction. There's a number of prominent projects coming up. The Upper Merion High School, which is huge, like 340,000 square feet. That should complete this year. I think they're opening it in the beginning of next school year.
I just passed there the other day.
It's immense. It's immense. Yeah, I had just given their school enrollment projection presentation a couple weeks ago. I saw it a month or two ago, and I saw it. Gorgeous, beautiful. Then Black Rock Middle School, Lower Merion should also, I think, finish this year. Supposed to open, I think, by the next school year, right, Scott? And then there are a ton, and I mean a ton, of logistics centers just, all completing in this year and next. So I think we'll start to see hundreds of thousands of industrial next year. I think the way that office was kind of the deliverer this year, we're gonna see industrial be the deliverer next year. A significant amount.
Centers are Amazon?
Not all Amazon, no. So a lot of them are they're actually, a lot of them are spec. A lot of spec, like Exit 31, CoreLogic's Logistics Center up, a lot of it's in Hatfield too. There's like, I think, at least almost 1 million square feet under construction in and around Hatfield just for distribution and logistics space. Yeah, we're not seeing like the 1 million square foot like super centers that we'll see like in Burlington or the Keystone Trade Center. Yeah. Yeah, and that's because they're focused on the longer distance, distribution, whereas these facilities seem to be probably more focused on like the near 100-mile distribution, right? So that's what we're seeing a lot of. I think that's what our highways are kind of like.
Definition of distribution, I understand, but logistics differently than distribution?
No, well, I just say it like, together. So the distribution and logistics, they kind of go hand in hand, sorry. Any other questions?
Well, I do have a question. With all that age restricted or age designated, the different terms of that is going to have an impact. I mean, people are changing where they're living, but they're still living in Montgomery County. They're not moving to Arizona and to Florida. So that's a big issue. The second one is we're building, as we say, it's great in the places we want to build, but the density and the change in those communities is also a big change in something may impact the way we think about planning and how we interact with our communities and our clients.
Definitely. No, I agree with you completely. Yeah, I mean, I think what we're just starting to see, and I think you'll know, and I'll note it when we talk about housing, especially with infill development, we're just seeing more expensive, larger development take place on more what we would probably call underutilized parcels today, because the zoning has changed and it allows for a lot more intensive development, right? So again, that's why we're seeing so many apartment buildings and business parks too. We've seen a lot of rezoning in those, and they are taking the advantage. I think up Fort Washington has like 3 proposed alone, like just along Virginia Drive next to each other that are in various phases of construction that will really change, right? Like that whole area will kind of make that a residential block in a way. And yeah, I think we're starting to see a lot of that. And it's actually kind of, it's exciting, actually.
We should see a lot of people on Cross County Trail coming out of these places. I mean, really.
A lot more activity.
Really.
And it has already changed our planning, for many years, just as Matt was talking about previously with the focus on operations and, the big expansion projects are no longer the focus or the funded element, so.
It is interesting.
We're writing a lot of zoning ordinances for municipalities that are integrating multifamily into them. And it's an opportunity for them. There's a demand for that and more compact living and walkability. But some of these communities are really going to be using that to leverage enhancement of their downtowns and of their commercial borders.
Exactly. It's almost the component of helping communities market the change in a way that existing community members are not so threatened and don't feel so inconvenienced, as lifting up the advantage of what we're providing and making sure that it's in the right place and designed well.
Exactly. Yeah. I think what I'd like to start seeing a little bit more of is for ownership opportunities of denser housing types, right? So what we're still not seeing is a lot of condo development. We're still seeing mainly rental development, which has only gotten more expensive and is now in bidding wars in this county. Not just in Philadelphia. In fact, Philadelphia rents seem to be a little bit lower than Montco, like new units comparable, right? Like I always give the example of the one that's right near me, the Poplar. It's like real nice, real done. Studio there costs $1,800. The average studio here costs like $2,000. Yeah, it's not really comparable. The suburbs are definitely, really on point right now. The city's losing population. Montco just keeps getting it. So I think that's a testament to that. I'm starting to see more of that. You can go to the next one.
Speaking of housing.
Yeah, right. That one right there, hub 20, yeah, that one. Sorry. I apologize for that. Left, yeah. All right. All right. All right, everybody, again, my name is Dan Farina. If you weren't here for that last presentation, I'm a senior county planner here at the Montgomery County Planning Commission, and I'm going to talk to you about housing units built today. The same thing we do with non-residential. We pull this information from the BOA, I categorize all the different units, clean it, and then we get our final data source. So up first, we had 2,209 housing units were built during 2021 in Montgomery County. This is a 35% decrease from the prior year. Before anyone gets alarmed, it's mainly in multifamily. It's mainly due to multifamily being basically cut in half, and it was a high point last year, that it ever hit in terms of construction. So it's not so much about oh, we're not building housing now, or no one wants to build housing here. It's more just a function of the ebb and flow of the construction industry and just what delivers when. We had a lot of multifamily deliveries last year. We didn't have as many this year, and it affects the overall total. But last year was the highest total of new units since 2000. So similar to that Chester article, I think if anyone saw that in the Inquirer, they had like 3,600 or 3,700 units built last year. Well, that was our high point. Last year was 3,200. So that was like, this year's total is still well above the low point following the Great Recession. So again, it's still, I think, it's a somewhat brisk pace of construction that we were seeing before last year, essentially. And that multifamily and single-family attached housing accounted for nearly 70% of all units built, which is less than last year, but still a very high amount, meaning that we're mainly building in this county the densest, housing types. So again, just to show you in reference, it don't look great to see that big of a drop, but again, it's more circumstantial, not so much about the actual market itself. What I will say though, is that there is probably built into this number, the cost of materials, the lower labor force available, and just the fact that these homes are taking longer to deliver. So, a home could have been delivered in 6 months before, now it's taking around a year and a half sometimes, depending on the developer and the capacity that they have. And I think that's also, led to complications in the financing industry, right? Because people are now falling out of eligibility for homes that they sign contracts on. Really weird, situation. And that's happening more and more, especially for single family detached homes that were contracted, say, like last year. So here's, I think, where you can see it really acutely, what was the biggest change, right? So multifamily was the big drop. Detached dropped a little bit, but not a lot. And attached did come down, I would say, somewhat considerably from last year. But again, I think it's more about just what's currently under construction and what delivered in that year. This year, we are on point, I think, for a number of large developments to deliver a good amount of units, especially like Ashbourne Meadows in like Cheltenham. There's a lot of big developments like that, even in the east, that we're starting to see delivery on units. And number of housing, so this is just showing you the distribution of all these housing units across the county. So Lower Merion and Horsham were the big ones this year. They had over 200 and around over 250 units, I think, each. Upper Merion, Limerick were also big gainers. New Hanover, mainly with detached housing. So this is where we're starting to see development go back out to the west, the exurban part of the county again, as demand has really increased over the last couple of years. But still, pretty consistent across the county. I would say something that's really interesting this year. Not a lot of housing built in our boroughs this year. And I think it's a function of the multifamily. We usually see multifamily being built in our boroughs. So like if you don't see a lot of that, you don't see a lot of borough construction. But yeah, a number of our boroughs didn't see any, including ones that I would expect to see something, because we usually do see something every year, like Sauderton, Hatboro, and Amber. We usually see something, like a couple units, but nothing last year. So single family detached, almost every municipality pretty much across the county built something, a little bit, something of it. And then New Hanover was the big one here. I think that's the Hanover Point development. Contributing to that. Lower Pottsgrove too. I think it's Saratoga Green. And
Sister?
yeah, right. I know. I didn't look into what specific development that is, but I will, and I'll get back to you.
Donut is filling in.
Yeah, that's why I said the same thing too. When I saw that, I'm like, that's a little different. I was a little surprised by that, because typically they're more, geared towards kind of keeping their rural, their rural environment, which that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not doing that. It's only like 50 units they built, but still, it's a lot for Worcester. And then Upper Dublin also built enough, and that a good amount, and that was because they're all age restricted though. That's the one caveat with that. They're all age restricted, single family detached. All right, median lot size. This is interesting, actually. So this has actually started to trend back upwards. We had hit a low point in the last couple years, right, with median lot size. And I don't think we're going to go back to 18,000, necessarily next year or higher than that again. But because we just don't have the kind of land for those large, half acre, or more developments anymore. Median living area though too has also gone up, and this isn't great for affordability. The bigger the home gets, the bigger the lot gets, the more expensive the home's going to get. So I don't, this isn't exactly bad necessarily. It's just something to keep an eye on. If these start keeping to go up, that's probably because we're building larger homes and they're likely going to be less attainable to lower and middle income buyers. When looking at attached units, well, Douglas, again, you're seeing some of this development now move further down 422, especially Limerick. Limerick is getting a lot of interest, a lot of developer interest, non-residential and residential. So this is definitely a place you're gonna see a lot, I think, of deliveries over the next couple of years as well too. But we're still seeing a good amount too in our our core of the county as well. And then multifamily this year is a lot more spread out in terms of deliveries. Last year, they were almost all, I think actually everything was in like the knot, that knot around Conshohocken. This year, it's all spread out across the county. Some of them are age restricted, like the ones in Limerick are age restricted. And the ones in Hatfield are age restricted, but I think everything else is market rate. And then looking at, this is the big map of growth and preservation. You can just giving you a quick overview of just where we expect to see growth. This year we had, I think it was 91% of all development was in already developed or already developing areas. We usually like to see less than 5% in rural resource areas. We saw, I think, 9% this year, and then less than 1% in conservation opportunity areas. There were just 4 random homes in the middle of the woods, basically. That's what that is. But yeah, the other ones were, it's not such great. It does fall below our benchmark, but not by a drastic amount. And I would say that the farther we move from the 2015 plan, you're going to see more and more of this too, just because now we haven't really redone our classification or our overall assumption of we updated it a little bit, but not to the degree where I think you would start to see any real change. But yeah, so what we're starting to see, I think, is a little bit more creeping into our rural resource areas of development, but that's just basically because of demand. When looking at detached homes, this is where it gets really interesting to me, because when you look at developed land, that's in theory land that's either, maybe you're subdividing a big lot and you're building another home on it. Maybe you're tearing down a home, putting 3 smaller homes, or in theory, 3 smaller homes on it. Apparently that's not necessarily the case though, because the median living area of homes that are built within the growth areas or the already developed areas are actually larger than the ones that are being built in the developable land. Now that's partly because the planning paradigm and the new zoning that enables developments in developable land is likely for smaller, plots of land and smaller homes in general. But what we are seeing, I think, is more expensive homes being built closer to the city in some of our inner ring communities, could be eviscerating a little bit of what was naturally attainable housing. You know what I mean? So it's something to keep an eye on. Same thing happens in rural resource areas. So developed land, rural resource areas have larger homes being developed on them, larger lots, versus ones where it's a developable land, classified as land we could see or you would see developed. And then conservation opportunity areas, that's so few and far between, it's hard to really get anything from that. What I will say though, really large lot, right? About 4 acres, right? But the median living area though is actually the smallest, which is really interesting. But anyway, for those, there were only 72 lots that were over 1 acre this year. So again, we're still mainly building, with detached homes, we're mainly building, sub 1 acre lot homes. Age restricted, there were 571 units this year, representing 26% of the total. There were 601 units last year, and they were representing, I think, like 18% of the total. Just to show you this, the distribution this year is more prevalence of age restricted within this year's deliveries. The majority of them were multifamily, 61%, but a good amount were detached too, 20%. It's a good amount of detached housing for age restricted. And then this is just where they all are. So again, big concentration around 422, and in kind of like that North Penn area where we typically see actually a lot. There's a number of aged care facilities there.
The one in Lower Pottsgrove is literally right up the street from us, and it sold out so fast you didn't even
really
have a chance to, which was shocking. I mean, we saw the pricing and it was just amazing how quickly it sold out.
Yeah, that's the other thing I've noticed too.
It's detached senior.
Is it small lot singles? Yes.
Yep.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
right.
In a very rural area of the township, very quiet, low volume street. So it was a good setting, but the pricing, I mean, these units are expensive.
They are
were
getting
the 300,000
Yeah.
plus. And it's 50 units and they sold out very quickly. So there's a very high demand for that.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately what I will say is that I've noticed that prices are really creeping up in the western side of the county. So, it used to be able to find a home under 3, new home under 3, west of not really anymore. It's
No,
hard.
there's a
At
detached,
3.
a detached
Yeah.
senior housing development closer into Pottstown and Manatawny area. And very, very reasonably priced. These new units are not that much different. It's a different setting,
Yeah.
but it's a sign of the times. I mean, those people paid under 200,000 for those units that were built. I mean, they may have been built about 10 years ago now. And now they're paying 400,000 or
Yeah,
upwards of
it's crazy.
400,000 for that type of unit.
So what does that functionally do, though? It pushes people who need to, who can only afford, homes that are under 300,000, which is, I'm gonna be honest, very, very much in line with like people's pay and cost of living here. It's pushing them further and further west. They're going into Berks County now. You know what I mean? To find a home under 3, close to the, close to the Philadelphia region, you kind of got to go to our, what we would call, our combined statistical area, not even our metro area anymore, So yeah, it is something to keep an eye on. In summary, housing production was down from the previous year, but still well above lows seen during after the Great Recession. Multifamily continued to represent the most units built of any type at 1,026. Both single-family detached and attached housing production decreased from 2020. Attached to multifamily units accounted for nearly 70% of the total housing construction. Both lot sizes and home sizes have begun to increase, but yearly totals are prone to wide variations. There's some of that in there too. Production of age-restricted units represented a higher percentage of all homes constructed than the previous year, 26% of all units. The majority were multifamily, as they have been in most of the past years, so it's not really a change. Overall, goals from the county's comprehensive plan were mostly met in 2021. It's not a huge drastic underperformance of what we would like to be at. And looking ahead, 2022 seems to be continuing this relative brisk pace of construction. And that's again to meet surging demand for new units as the inventory of existing homes in the market continues again to decline significantly year over year. When that abates, I have no idea, and I think increasingly most of the housing economists also have no idea. I think they thought that would have abated by now. But we are starting to see some slackening in demand, right, as a result of higher interest rates and just people getting discouraged, quite frankly, because there's not enough choice out there for them. And we're starting to see less bidding wars. I think in the city, you're starting to see time in the market increase, which is good. For Montgomery County though, it's very hard to find a home here, especially if it's under 3, existing. I would say, but the only places in the county now you'll find that are some of the attached developments scattered across the county. Norristown, Pottstown, maybe Lansdale, maybe. Not really. Cheltenham, you wouldn't see that. You used to be able to see that in Ambler, not anymore either. But yeah, it's getting rough out there for home buyers, especially if they're not wanting to buy a new home, just an existing home. But I already went over that with the median home price.
Especially first-time home buyers.
Yes, I mean, I am one myself. It's terrifying.
Well, we have a number of them in our office. I mean, these are young professionals. They've reached a point in their career. They want to be homeowners and they can't.
Yeah, that's around that too.
For inflation, for, the challenges in competing for these properties, just the lack of inventory, and they are getting very discouraged and they are talking about moving out of the area completely, moving south. Significant moves because of the affordability, the availability, and the opportunities with growth that are happening in those areas. So we are losing people from the region, not just the next county. We are losing them completely.
Thing is, when they go to those new southern cities now, they're getting for a rude awakening. Taxes are rising, infrastructure is getting more expensive, homes are some of the most expensive. Look at Florida's home insurance crisis right now. They can't get anyone to friggin' insure your home. Homes are now the average price to insure your home is 3 times higher than it was last year in Florida. Oh, you should look up what's going on in Florida right now with the roofing scams. Yeah, it's really interesting. Bunch of insurance operators in Florida have cashed out. They're no longer, they transferred their or canceled all their
They're just giving up.
Yeah, they just gave up and they're leaving the state. 8 have already left the state. Yeah.
Why?
It's a complicated issue having something to do with the quality of like the roofing rehabilitation after all these storms, like after hurricanes and stuff, and how they're not done to, I think, a certain spec or code, and it's, they're calling it a scam, a roofing scam. And that,
Vulnerability.
Yes.
Moving forward, so they're out.
Yeah. So, and I think it's going to get harder to insure homes in these areas too. I was reading something the other day too about just the increase in tornado and thunderstorm activity in what is called Dixie Alley now. You used to have Tornado Alley, when I have Dixie Alley. So that whole part is out where Atlanta is and Nashville, and we saw Nashville in the middle of a city. People always think tornadoes can't hit urban areas. No, urban areas are 2% of our land. That's why. It's more likely that they'll hit open space. Yes, statistically, exactly. But no, they can. Oklahoma City, Salt Lake City, Nashville have all been hit directly by tornadoes. And so that I think is increasing costs down there too. That may actually work to keep people up here a little bit sometimes, who knows? But at the same time, our cost of living is going to have to rise in order for people to afford to live, to buy homes here. And rent, actually, increasingly rent as well. Yeah. But,
Are there, are you finished with that, Dan?
yes, sorry.
Okay. We've already had some comments or questions. Any other comments or questions for Dan on either one of these, residential, non-residential? Charlie, Bob, anything?
None here for me. Good report.
Always provocative.
Sorry.
That's good.
Trying to engage.
Bob, anything?
I'm sorry, Steve, I thought I was unmuted. No, I mean, Dan, you do great reports. Really appreciate it. I've heard through the grapevine that Amazon is pulling back a little bit on
Yes.
some of their.
We had the pool, a couple sites we were working on.
Yeah, so what is really interesting, right? So about that Amazon distribution center, right? That's very odd for them to own the real estate, the land and the facility that they operate distribution and logistics, right? Things like that. But yeah, overall, I think they've scaled back, I think about 10% of the leases they even signed last year too, right? So they expanded, right, during last year, and now they're kind of contracting again as spending kind of shifts a little bit more back to away from goods to services, which could have an effect on inflation too, so that could be positive. Because that's typically kind of what actually rose inflation to a degree. Some of it, is just the demand for goods as opposed to services, right, over the last couple of years. But yeah, no, Amazon is scaling back their leasing activities at least. I don't know so much about their build to suit, but their leasing, yeah, they are scaling back. I've heard that, I've read that. Yep.
Any questions, John?
I think I'm good. I guess the office buildings that we talked about at the beginning were all started and planned before the everybody started working from home.
Yes, very much so. Yeah. So and anecdotally, 7 Tower Bridge, Hamilton Lane, who's the majority, holder of that building, they actually did wind up releasing, I think, 1 or 2 of the floors from their lease, and so they're on the market essentially. So they did wind up, making small their position at Amerisource Bergen. Nope, still has the whole building from what I understand, and I think they're more aggressive with having people in the office at least some days of the week. And then SCI is just SCI. It's a corporate campus, so that they built it, and I think it's only 100,000 square feet. It looks like it's much bigger from the road because it's like the way the angle is. But yeah, I think that those were all built to a degree with a tenant in mind too. And most office construction doesn't get off the ground unless it's 50%, guaranteed lease anyway. So, but,
Thank you.
yeah.
Jonathan, anything?
I'm good, thank you.
Call anyone else? Awesome. So anecdotally, I mean, we're seeing contractions, we're starting to see
Yeah.
people starting to, hold back a little bit.
Yeah.
Or reimagine what they're trying to do with their projects. I also, there's also a group of, property owners, developers who are learning from the last recession in 08 and 09. And are pooling their money and waiting to pounce once there's a dip in the market and pick up some of these over leveraged properties, because that seems to be one of the bigger trends right now is over leveraged properties. So it'll be interesting to see how that transition occurs differently than it did back in 08.
In 08, yeah.
Supply chain is just
A nightmare right now, a nightmare. I mean, just it's a way that prices just keep skyrocketing and then coming back down. Skyrocket lumber was 30% more expensive last month, and it's so volatile right now.
4 projects going on right now, and I spend a good portion of my week just trying to weave through, trying to deal with supply chain issues. And
What's available and how does it-
reimagine a project,
Yeah.
how to reschedule a project. But the carry cost on some of these projects for clients is just
Yeah.
eating them apart.
Yeah.
And making it very difficult.
That's why River Point has, I think, yet to really put any foundations in the ground. They can't find enough ductile iron. All right, can't put any sewer systems in. You know what I mean? They can't put piping systems in, yeah. Yeah, so.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Steve. Can I make one comment to it? Just, I would appreciate the analysis you do on where the growth's taking place and relative to their growth and preservation plan.
Yeah.
That's really valuable for the regional planning.
Yeah.
Not only does it reinforce, I think, the value of regional planning and how it kind of concentrates that development, but also it shows you can accommodate growth without having to use farm fields for it. So much of the growth is actually occurring in the developed areas,
Mhm.
and that's what we want to be able to show.
Exactly, yeah. All right, thank you.
Next up, we have New Hanover Township Planning Assistance Contract presentation, and Danielle, I think I saw you on Zoom. How are you doing?
Yes, good morning, everyone. It looks
Morning.
like we are a little ahead of schedule, so I will try to keep us that way.
Or you can just pick up all the time.
Can you all see my screen?
You can.
Great. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Danielle Baer. I'm a community planner here at MCPC. And today I'm just going to be presenting on New Hanover Township's Community Planning Assistance Contract Renewal. Just to set the stage geographically a little bit, New Hanover Township is located in the western portion of Montgomery County within the Pottstown metropolitan region. Looking at their existing land use, you can see that they're a very largely residential and agricultural community, covering a large majority of their land. Something you might have picked up on from Dan's presentation is a lot of that residential development is single family detached. I believe 89% of all dwelling units in the township are single family detached. So that's a large majority there. And that's something we're looking to diversify their housing stock a little bit more. Looking at DVRPC's population forecasts, they predict in the year 2050 over 18,000 residents in the township. And this actually, when comparing their percent population growth for these forecasts with other communities in the county, this is one of the fastest growing projected communities in Montgomery County, again, based on that percentage population growth. I believe some of that is probably due to DVRPC factoring in potential developments that are in the pipeline right now. New Hanover in the last 5 years actually has received 10 plans that altogether propose roughly 1,800 or 1,900 dwelling units on about 755 acres. So that's a significant amount of development that's possibly in New Hanover's future. Looking back at our previous contract achievements, I recently took over for Maggie Dobbs, so she actually led the way on the comp plan. I really just finished up the last chapter and marched it over the finish line and got it adopted, but that was probably the largest project we worked on for New Hanover Township. We also then last year adopted the Village Mixed Use District. That's the first portion of the comprehensive rezoning that we're going to be doing for the township. And that district is located really in the heart of the township around North Charlotte Street and Swamp Pike, where they have a lot of proposed development and where they want to really focus some more mixed use development, village style, neighborhood scale, commercial, and really make that the heart of their township. And then finally, we also had started their subdivision and land development ordinance rewrite. And at the end of last year, we had adopted some of their more procedural and administrative sections of that. Looking ahead to this new contract, there's really three main goals for the structured assistance that we're providing. First, finishing that comprehensive saldo update. The township actually just last month adopted new design guidelines for the saldo. So that's exciting. We got that done in a pretty short time period for them. Also, we want to now be getting back to that comprehensive zoning update, looking at the remaining districts that they have in the township, rewriting those, maybe factoring in some cluster development provisions and really taking a full comprehensive look at that ordinance. And then finally, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation, is the Wasmer Tract Passive Recreation Plan. This is a unique opportunity for the township. They own this tract, it's about 90 acres, and they've preserved it for open space. And now they've kind of hired us to look at it and figure out how to lay out a nice trail for them and really bring people to the site as a nice amenity for the residents. So the terms of this new contract, it's a 3-year contract. It took effect on January 1st of this year and goes through December 31st of 2024. They have 2.5 planner days per month. They're contracted for 12 night meetings per year. And the total cost is about $77,000, of which their municipal share is half. And finally, just to kind of dive into this Wasmer Tract passive recreation plan a little bit more. This is something that I've been working on with our design team. Patty and Barry have been super helpful with this. We're looking to complete it this year, but we've taken a few site visits, walked around the 90 acres as best as we can. We're actually going back out there in a couple weeks again to take another look at another section of the site because it is so large. But this is really a project that stemmed from the comp plan. The comp plan has a large emphasis on bringing people, either existing residents or future residents, with all this proposed development in the township, really giving them access to some of the amenities that already exist in the township, some open space amenities, trails, that kind of stuff, getting people out in nature more. So this is actually a really exciting project. If you can see, this is the tract that we're looking at here, this large tract. To set the stage, this is North Charlotte Street to the right here. And the township building is down in this bottom right corner, right here. And the township actually also owns this Layfield tract adjacent to the Wasmer tract, which has public playing fields on it. So that's another amenity that we want to kind of connect through this system here. And there's a lot of potential development around the site. So up here, there's a proposed residential development, if you can see my cursor. Down here is the McGee tract, which came in for subdivision and land development review last year, I believe, or 2 years ago, maybe. The McSturdy tract, again, another proposed development. And then up here, a little off the screen, across the street, across North Charlotte, is another proposed residential development. So while there's a lot of existing homes, there's a lot of future potential residents very close to this site. So we really want to get moving on this and really provide a nice amenity for the residents. So that's really all I wanted to go over today. I'm open to take any questions or elaborate more on anything if anyone has any comments or questions.
What's the program for the recreational, for that track?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
What's the program for that track? What are they trying to achieve in that?
Yeah, so that's something that we've been working with them to figure out. I think really they just want a trail. It is a very wet tract, so it's going to be very interesting figuring out how we would recommend designing the trail, making sure it doesn't get washed away and it's easy to maintain for the township. But they really just want a trail, and Barry is actually looking at, through our site visits, looking at different pockets of interesting areas that we want to make sure that we bring them to and connect them to. Maybe a nice little picnic bench set up in one little grove area. Nothing crazy. I know one planning commission member, I believe, mentioned wanting some ATV tracks or something of the sort. That was not very popular opinion, so I think we're keeping it to strictly just basic trail system.
And how are they looking to fund that? Do you have an idea?
It's interesting, Danielle, I do believe this was an acquisition that they used their earned income tax, open space bond money. I believe it was, am I correct? It was an old Gambone property.
It was, yes. Back, the latest proposed plan for this was back in 2008, and it was Gambone who had proposed a large residential development, actually. And this obviously predated me. I'm not really sure what happened there. I don't know if it was the economy or something, but they really wanted to back out of that. Again, the site is very wet, so maybe they realize it's not great for development in the first place.
It's right back of the township building. It
Correct.
was, I'm just trying to add, Stephen, some of the open space that Danielle might not, be familiar with. So the township did have an open space referendum a number of years ago. They stockpiled because they understood that on their comprehensive plan, there was going to be a lot of impact. They had an open space committee at one point. I don't know if it's still active. But the other thing that's really important is legislation was also introduced and passed at the state level to allow you to use your open space money, not only for acquisition, but for enhancement. So there is a component of those funds that can be used at the discretion of the community, not only for buying it, for enhancing it.
Are there other questions for Danielle on Hanover?
And again, I could elaborate a little more on the history of the site too. So before
Yeah.
Gambone came in, it actually was farmland. And Patty and Barry, when we were out there, identified several very unique rows of trees and plantings that looked very deliberate. And we found out through aerial imagery that it was at one point an orchard as well. So you still see the exact rows of trees lined up, and we think that's a pretty unique feature that we want to bring people out to as well.
Any other questions for?
I'm sorry?
School district or?
No, I think it's Boyertown.
Boyertown.
Is it Boyertown?
Correct, yeah, it's Boyertown.
It's very strange in that part of the county. Some of the kids go into Berks County and it's.
And you talked about all this development around there. How many houses are we looking at that are proposed or?
Yeah,
permitting?
so just in the last 5 years, there were 10 plans that proposed 1,896 units on 755 acres. So it's really a lot of large plans. There's an age restricted community that's planned called Hanover Meadows. I don't know how familiar people are. It's right south of Big Road and right at the intersection of Big Road and 663, just north of this, if you follow North Charlotte up here a little bit. And that had recently proposed 570 age restricted units, which I believe based on Dan's presentation would equal what was built just in the last year in the whole county.
And how many units have been built that are out of the number that you just gave, that are 1,000 units?
None of these have been built. These are all in the preliminary plan phase right now.
Also, Danielle, I don't know what's the latest, because I haven't been following it, for that New Hanover school, the Charlotte.
I was gonna
and-
raise that too.
Yeah,
The town center at North Charlotte and Swamp.
and it also had some very environmentally sensitive land running right through there, headwaters. It used to have heron rookeries. Nicole probably knows also, and it has
Yes.
been, I don't know if Arcadia for a while was marketing it. I don't know what's happening, but that's a big site with an uncertain future, let's put it that way.
Yes, and that's really that's a good way to articulate a lot of the sites in this township, unfortunately. They have, like a lot of the county, they have very undesirable soils, you could say, and they just have a lot of flooding. Every meeting I go to, it's all about stormwater flooding concerns of the community. So they see all this development coming in, and there's definite fear there. So that's why we're working with them.
And it's a challenge because when you think, you articulated it very well, Danielle, and it's important to look at the land use in New Hanover Township. It is really all residential and agricultural for the most part. And as it continues to grow and the population projections, there are not a lot of services in the township. And so you look at, people may point to the town center as a solution, but it also comes with a lot of problems. And it has been extremely contentious in the township. We serve as their traffic engineer. So not only, I live in Lower Pottsgrove, about a mile from the New Hanover Township line, so I see it, but we're also involved in it. And they are up against a lot of challenges, and the decisions that they make about some of these developments, like the town center, could transform the township. And they've got a lot of important items before them that they're gonna have to make decisions on.
Yes, definitely.
Sewers up there? Sewers?
I think that certain areas, but there are a lot of areas of the township that are not sewered.
Yeah, so south of Big Road is their sewer boundary. So about half of the township is north of that, and that's not.
Yeah.
And is there a concern about the school district population with these units coming in?
So I guess 570 of those are proposed to be age restricted. So that's kind of something that hasn't come up as a significant concern. Again, they're really, the front of their mind is just traffic and stormwater, but I imagine that's a definite concern. And they've tried to loop the school district in as much as possible as well. And they do a good job of inviting them to all their meetings when these plans are being discussed.
And there has been a lot of talk locally, when you look, at the Potts Grove School District, for example, versus Boyertown, the tax rates are very different, but with all this growth, building new schools, I mean, that's definitely at the top of people's minds as well.
Yep.
Any other questions for Danielle? Bob, Charlie, anything?
Nothing for me.
Thanks, Bob. Charlie, anything? You're still on mute, Charlie. Charlie, you're still on mute. No, still on mute, Charlie.
Okay,
Yep, now
Here we go.
Now we got it.
it's rumored that the country club will be closed and 500 houses will be built there. Was this reflected in your 1,800 units?
Yes, so a new plan actually just came in last month that I included within that estimate for the Gilbertsville Golf Course, and that includes 297 single-family detached homes proposed right now.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, Danielle. I appreciate it.
Yep, thank you.
Brings us to the director's report.
I just want to point out Danielle has done a great job, and she mentioned Maggie, before she left at the beginning of 2021. I drafted about 90% of the comprehensive plan, but she was a little bit modest. If anybody's worked on a comprehensive plan, the last 10% and getting it through the adoption process is a very big lift, and she did a great job with that. And they also have some urgency in the community with the development pressure they're seeing to update their zoning. And she completely wrote their village mixed-use district last year as well. So she's done a great job and really forged a great relationship with the community.
Great. Thank you.
All right, well, again, we are ahead of schedule, so but I do have some things I wanted to talk about. We start with staff news and some good news. I want to welcome our newest planner aboard, who's in the back of the room here. Andrew Turner is joining our transportation section. Just a quick introduction. Andrew comes to us from as a planning consultant in the UK, from across the sea, and I believe Scottish is your native country. I'll mess up whatever I try to say. Within the United Kingdom country, I guess is accurate. And he is completing his master's in community planning at the University of Cincinnati. I also note he's an experienced vegetable farmer and has managed urban agricultural nonprofit in Philadelphia and operated community supported agriculture operation in Chester County. So that'll be a unique little thing to bring into the transportation side of things as well.
Does he, what right side of the road does he?
What's that?
What side of the road? I mean, are we okay on that one?
Oh, yeah, I've driven here a lot longer than.
Oh, no, I'm kidding.
Yeah, so say hello, and any words you want to add?
Great, thanks for the welcome. Yeah, anything to add? Nice to meet you.
Welcome. Look forward to working with you.
Great. So we still have an opening in our design section for assistant section manager as well as an environmental planner. Currently going through interviews on both of those accounts. I'm seeking to add a staff position to increase our overall staff size in the community planning section based upon the workload that is currently there and the prospects of at least one new contract, which is likely to be consummated very soon. And the work has only grown in that section, outgrowing the amount of people we have to handle it. So there's a process, there's a longer term process within the county administration for adding, during the budget season. This is a little more urgent, I guess is the right word, or desired to be more urgent. So I will find out if we can make that happen sooner than otherwise it would take. And then I also want to announce Claire Warner, our community planner, received an award this month from GDF TMA. It's the 40 under 40 transit demand management. And we're very excited and happy for her and recognize her skills. Her work with TOD, as well as in Bridgeport and some of her other communities, really justified her inclusion for that award. And we were happy to see her honored for it earlier this month. And then finally, on the staff news front, I do have bad news to report. And that is that we are losing Matt Edmond. We saw today, he has accepted a position with SEPTA as a director of real estate. And his last day with us will be June 24th of this month. And obviously, he's been here quite 18 years, quite a while, and had quite an impact, and is certainly one of our linchpins in the agency. But we congratulate him on this opportunity. It certainly is a great professional advancement for him. And we'll be working to address that vacancy. The only thing I would say at this point is that Matt Popek will be the interim manager of the transportation section, and then we'll be looking at the long-term adjustments from that move in a very short-term fashion, I can assure you. So Matt I think he's rounding out of, he's standing in for me at a department head meeting right now, but he'll probably pop in at the end and join us for lunch if he can. All right. Moving on to staff news, a couple updates. The Schuylkill River Passenger Rail Authority, which was authorized in all 3 counties in April, is moving towards its first board meeting on July 6th, which will be in Reading. Again, myself, Commissioner Lawrence, and Dave Zellers represent Montgomery County on that board. And so we're busily getting ducks in a row to with all the things that have to happen with having new authority, as well as the new guidelines and feedback that's come from the FRA as far as future applications to get a new rail corridor into the federal program, which will really take off in the 4th quarter of this year.
Is anything in the tip about that?
No, so that's a good point. It's still very early, and all of that money that we're trying to tap into to create that service is coming from the IIJA. So it's there may be TIP associated work down the line to support that, but first we have to get into the IIJA program and be selected by the FRA as a corridor. So we're not quite there. We do have money. We did get some money in the federal spending bill to help with the studies that will be needed. So that's a good thing. Let's see. On Planning Smarter, we had our Hot Topics virtual meeting or event presentation on May 24th. Went very well. Got a decent attendance. I think we're still trying to boost attendance these days to these events, but I think there were 30 to 40 people there. A lot of information was exchanged. We had 3 topics on infill development, electrical vehicle trends and land use, and innovative ordnance testing techniques. So I think those who attended got a lot of value out of that, and we'll continue with that format. We have another Planning Smarter coming up right around the corner on June 16th, which is next week on Thursday. It will be in Pottstown. It'll be an in-person event. There will be a virtual attendance possible, but we are encouraging people that there'll be a lot of value in coming out to this. It's focused on walking and bicycling in your community and strategies to enhance those aspects. So Pottstown's a great place to look at some innovative things that have been done on that front. And the first hour of this event, which will be from 4:30 to 5:30, will actually be a trolley tour where we'll go and see some of these improvements and strategies in and around Pottstown to learn about them. And then we'll return back to the Hill School, which is where the event will be hosted. And we'll be hearing several presentations from 5:30 to 7 and discussion. We have some outside guests coming in from communities Narberth, Upper Providence, and Pottstown itself. Talk about some of the strategies and projects that they've done in their places, as well as our staff contributing to that. And Matt and Ann, who have just returned, are leading that effort. Any board members are certainly welcome to join us. We've been blasting the emails out, and there's a registration online at our Planning Smarter webpage. If you go to montcopa.org/planning. So we look forward to seeing anyone there. Moving to our events coming up, we have tomorrow night, Matt Edmond will be speaking on behalf of the Planning Commission about transportation to our Montgomery County Association of Township Commissioners for a dinner event. He was invited to talk about current trends in transportation planning and the county's vision for its transportation system. And then on Friday, so we're milking Matt for all weekend for
Scheduled every day.
Between now and the 24th.
Yes,
Punishment. Punishment? What is this?
you will also be, and not alone, Bill Hartman will join him with the Partnership TMA, which is like GBF, a Transportation Management Association. And they will be talking about greenways and as well as environmental aspects associated with transportation. So both Bill and Matt will be participating in that event on June 10th. Later in the month, we're having a staff picnic on June 22nd. And I do want to offer, if you're in Norristown or can be in Norristown, feel free to drop by. It'll be from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. at Elmwood Park over by the zoo. And everyone's bringing their own lunch. It's a chance to get outdoors, lockdown fever, trying to alleviate some of that. We've been in the office for some time, but we never get the whole staff together at once. So this will be a
22nd
fun
and
time.
21st, did you say 22nd?
22nd, yes. 12 o'clock. And then also on the 22nd, we'll have to get back by 1:30 for another of our comprehensive plan focus groups. This one will be on housing. And actually today at 1 o'clock, we have our focus group on open space and trails. So those are both upcoming. Any board members are welcome. We have recruited several of you to be at those meetings by default, but anyone is welcome if you want to participate. And then also just a shout out for the Cheltenham Comprehensive Plan Public Workshop on June 23rd. This has been, it was delayed a number of times due to township issues and staffing issues. So looking forward to getting that out off the ground.
When is that?
That is June 23rd at 6:30 p.m. It will be virtual. Yeah. Okay. So that's good.
And Scott, there were a couple things I forgot. I've been very bad about adding to that, but I just want to mention, because it is sort of relevant, is that next week I'll be attending the strategic planning meeting for the state planning organization. So it's in State College. I'll also be attending the state board meeting as well, just because I'll be there. But there's a whole planning session, and the people that they wanted there were certainly, if you were on the state board, but any members of the selection councils. So I'll be attending that, and then the next day I'll be attending the legislative committee in the state as well. So
yeah.
I neglected to get that on the schedule.
Okay. And then also, this isn't on the events list, and it's not a public event, obviously. It's on Friday, there will be a delegation for the convening of our legislative delegation for the state. And it's really an opportunity. We try to schedule, the county tries to schedule once in a while to get important legislative advocacy and requests out there in front of our delegation. I'll be presenting at that meeting on behalf of the initiative to create more local transportation funding mechanisms or revenue generators, which currently is not really facilitated by state law. So there's a bill out there now sponsored by Representative Hennessy that would create new mechanisms to allow for local transportation funding projects and generating that revenue. So we are trying to garner support to get that passed, because it would really help not only the county, but the region as a whole with some important projects like the rail projects, but also some intersection and road improvements that aren't on the tip. Believe it or not, there are many of those. So,
and what mechanisms of funding would that be?
There's a whole host, and there have been a lot of regional discussions and studies looking at them. They include things like local services tax, vehicle registration fee additions, some other taxes, and Not all of them are appealing to us, but we're trying to get a wide gamut so that whatever county is looking at it, they can consider what would be most palatable and useful to them.
The reality is a lot of other states are doing that and doing it very successfully, and I think Pennsylvania is a little behind the ball on it.
Absolutely.
It is additional taxes, and we have to be cognizant of that, but a lot of other states are doing it.
There are some creative ways and a way to really lessen the burden and also be conscious of who it affects and being not being progressive about it. Finally, I think the last thing I want to talk about, and this is breaking news, this came in actually during our meeting, but I wanted to just update on ARPA. So you heard about all the projects last month. They've been in the review committee with the 430 other projects that were submitted during that window. Recovery offices had a Herculean task and they're still at it. I just learned that the timeline for that has been delayed slightly from what was posted publicly and online. We are currently looking at final review scores targeted for June 17th, although that's internal. I don't know when they'll be posted publicly yet. July 18th through July 29th is when the draft recovery plan will be published for review and feedback. And the expected adoption of the final recovery plan is set for August 18th at a Board of Commissioners meeting. I've also learned that my next 10 days will have to be readjusted. They're looking for any impact from all the experts on staff on different topics on these submissions. They're all being independently scored and reviewed by a large fleet of project reviewers, but they still want our input on and suggestions where projects might be able to get merged or directed to other funding sources or anything else. So I won't have to look at all 430 of them, but those that are relevant to our topics certainly will. I also saw for the first time a more distinct breakdown of some of the applications that came in. And I'll just mention that the top category in terms of number of submissions was in behavioral health. The second top was in housing. So that certainly is an eligible topic and a priority. I'm glad that's well represented just in the numbers. Child care services was third and economic and workforce development was fourth. There's like 30 categories, so I'll stop there, but those were the biggest number. In terms of dollars, housing had the most dollars actually proposed or requested for projects. Second was community centers. So a lot of municipalities probably putting in for that type of support. Third was economic and workforce development, and fourth was public utilities and infrastructure. I think a lot of our stormwater and about half our projects are probably sitting in that category as well. So I'll be diving into that spreadsheet after lunch probably and the weekend, as well as some of our staff. Just a little warning. We might wait till Monday to give you guys some break. I believe that took us to when I think we're supposed to have lunch delivered. So if you're okay, I'll end that.
Any other comments from board members before we adjourn?
Yeah, Steve, I have a comment. Is there going to be anything done for Matt after 18 years? From a county standpoint?
He's busy.
He's busy, we can't have that party, you know.
Bob, you can't, can't be bothered with parties.
Do we have another meeting before Matt leaves?
No.
We don't. And staff, we'll have a lunch or afternoon, just cake or something here, and I'll let you guys know when that is, and you're welcome to join in. There'll probably be an evening excursion. I don't have details on that, but yeah, it's a little sudden, so we're
Somebody ought to call Leslie and tell her to go easy on the planning commission.
It's been suggested. Bob, but you were the one that was given the task.
Any other comments from board members? Meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Stephen.
See ya.
I have to stop.